Hi, I'm Gail Sokol, and on today's show, we're going to be discussing marshmallows.
Welcome to Baking Radio. Learn the art and science of baking with author, educator, and award-winning chef, Gail Sokol. Whether you've been baking your whole life or you're brand new to the world of baking and you're looking to build your confidence and learn new skills in the kitchen, you're in the right place. This is Baking Radio.
I thought it would be fun on today's show to define a marshmallow. Everyone's been eating them all their lives, right? You know you have. And some people are like, well, what is a marshmallow? What is it really? You put it in the hot cocoa, you put it in your s'more, and we don't really know what they are. And not until I made one for a competition, which won a gold medal, by the way, that was really, really cool, did I actually explore and research what a marshmallow was. So let me define what a marshmallow really is. It's a stabilized meringue that can be made with or without egg whites. And it's actually an Italian meringue. And I had a previous show on different types of meringues and egg foams. So if you want to look into more about other types of meringues, go to that show, but we'll go over what an Italian meringue is too. So the most stable meringue there is an Italian meringue. So with the gelatin added, whatever you make with it is going to last even longer and have a longer shelf life. Gelatin is usually added to marshmallows because the gelatin firms them up and allows them to keep for a lot longer. The magic of gelatin. So how many of you think you know how to work with gelatin? And I don't mean making lime jello for dessert or making cherry jello or a mold that you make for friends and family on Thanksgiving or Christmas. How many of you actually know how to work with gelatin? Gelatin can be a little tricky. So I'm talking about unflavored gelatin. And it's really magical. It really is something that can actually help you firm up an ingredient and a food, and you don't realize it's in many, many things. So what is it and how do we use it? So defined, gelatin is basically colorless, tasteless. I'm not talking about the flavored gelatin, remember. It's colorless and tasteless. It's a water-soluble protein, so it dissolves in water, very important. And it's prepared from collagen that's usually gotten from the connective tissues of cow and pigs. So if you ever look on the container of gelatin, look on the ingredients. It will say contains gelatin. It will not go into it any further. So you may never have had that question answered. Now, if you're a vegan, you may have heard, oh my goodness, there's animal products in my gelatin. What are we going to do? There is a vegan gelatin that's usually gotten from certain seaweeds. Agar is one, and it can be used in its place, in any gelatin's place. So how you prepare gelatin to be used in something like a marshmallow, which is what I'm going to give you a recipe for soon enough, there's a specific procedure to use when you use unflavored gelatin, and each and every time you use it, you will undergo this procedure. And it will incorporate much better with your ingredients. So let me start. It's sort of a 3-part procedure. It's super easy. First, you need to mix your powdered gelatin into a cold liquid. It could be a liquid that's part of the recipe, or it could be water. It depends on what the recipe is and how it tells you to get your gelatin ready. So for our marshmallow, we would be using gelatin mixed with water. And you will allow it to sit in the water for a few minutes, and it will bloom. That's actually a term used for gelatin that sits for a few minutes in the cold liquid as blooming the gelatin. The gelatin swells and it softens. If you actually put some of the little gelatin crystals in your mouth, they're crunchy. They're not really something you can use as is. You have to hydrate them, and then you have to melt them down. So hydrating them actually softens them. So we either say we soften the gelatin or we bloom it. And the mixture of gelatin and water soon, first you mixed in the water into the gelatin and it was liquid. Within a few minutes, it will look like a jellyfish. And you can turn that bowl of gelatin and water upside down and it won't fall out because it actually solidified. And that gelatin, those little particles of gelatin actually swelled and sucked up all that water. So that's the blooming phase. That's number one. Number two, you need to melt it down. So usually I put it into a hot liquid. Usually that's part of the recipe and it will tell you to put it into this hot liquid. Or it can be melted into melted in a small heat-proof cup that will be put into a warm water bath or a hot water bath. And it will melt that way as well. So there are many ways. And then number three, you incorporate it into your remaining ingredients. So it's a 3-part procedure. First, you're blooming or softening it, then you're melting it down, then you incorporate. Very simple, very easy. So let's go back to our topic of the day, marshmallows, right? Marshmallows. So what are the great things about marshmallows? Why do you want to make them on your own? I actually, in my first book, I have a recipe for marshmallows that is wonderful and very, very easy to make. And it's in my first book about professional baking. And it's used worldwide. It's used as a textbook and as a cookbook all over for students all over the world. And I remember I had the book reviewed, my publisher did before it was published. And one woman teacher, professor at some college wrote, "Why do you want to make marshmallows? Who cares? Just buy them." And I thought, well, I'm not going to pay any attention to this reviewer because I really want to give a recipe for marshmallows. I had won that gold medal using this marshmallow recipe, and I really thought it was well worth students getting to know how to make them and what they were. So the first thing I will tell you is getting marshmallows homemade, making them from scratch. You can do any number of things with them that you couldn't if they come like the little round blobs that you buy, whether they're miniature or large in the stores, in the grocery stores. So you can cut them any way you want. I've cut them in squares, triangles, circles, any way you want. You can actually take a cookie cutter and cookie cutter out marshmallows in any shape. You can even color them or flavor them. I once made, listen to this, passion fruit marshmallows once. Is that cool or what? I mean, you can make them any flavor, anything you want. And you can even pipe them from a pastry bag. So in my first book about professional baking, I pipe them out of a pastry bag with a star tip, and they look like little candies. And then I scatter them with chopped nuts and chopped chocolate, and they are like these soft, cushy little stars. Now that is sort of cool. And they can be put on top of a cake or just popped into your mouth. You can even dip them into melted chocolate and sprinkle them with things, whether it's sprinkles, nuts, coconut, anything you want. So they're very versatile if you make your own. And my favorite way to make them is I love to brulee them, put them under the broiler, or if you're like me, get a small blowtorch. And you can make your own s'mores by just blowtorching all around because it's made of sugar. There's sugar in your marshmallow and it will burn and caramelize with that heat from that little blowtorch. And they do sell small blowtorches. I've used very big ones, like your fix-it guy would use or a contractor would use, commercially. But I really recommend you get a tiny blowtorch. They're really not expensive. They're about $30, $33. Well worth it. And they use butane gas, which you can even get in the grocery store. So I have this fabulous marshmallow recipe. It does not use any egg whites. So if you're allergic to eggs, it's something you'd rather stay away from, even though they do get cooked. In my new book, Baking with Success, which is available in bookstores everywhere, all over the world, online, and even as an ebook, you can get a fabulous recipe without egg whites. What I'm going to give you now is a marshmallow recipe with egg whites. This was my award-winning one, and this is in my first book about professional baking. So there's a lot of variety with various marshmallow recipes with egg whites, without egg whites, but they all have one thing in common. They have gelatin, and they are a stabilized Italian meringue. So an Italian meringue uses a sugar syrup that you make with sugar and water, and you bring it to a boil, and it usually climbs, you want your thermometer to climb to about 240 degrees, which is also known as the soft ball stage. And if you don't have a thermometer, you take a little cup of water and you put a little bit of the syrup into that cup of water. And after it cools down, you grab it with your fingers. And if you can roll it, this little bit of sugar syrup into a soft ball and it's squishy, that's known as the soft ball stage. And if it continues to cook too long, you get into the hard ball stage where it actually turns almost into a candy. And you're getting closer to caramelization. Remember, as you get to 300 degrees, we talked about caramel on a previous show. So, you can bone up on your caramel lesson if you'd like to go to that show and hear about it. So basically, once you get to this softball stage or 240 degrees, this hot sugar syrup is beaten into our beaten egg white, and it cooks it. And that sugar syrup being beaten into that egg white is known as an Italian meringue. So that's the basis for our marshmallows. So get ready. Here is a fabulous marshmallow recipe. And this makes about 1.5 pounds of marshmallows, which really isn't that much. It's about a 9 by 13 inch pan. If you've ever made brownies in a 9 by 13 inch pan, it's about that big. So you're going to spray a 9 by 13 inch pan with nonstick cooking spray and line the bottom with parchment. It's important that you do this or else you're not going to get your marshmallow out because it's going to be sticky. You're going to sprinkle a heavy layer of confectioner's sugar over that parchment paper, not granulated sugar. Make sure that it is confectioner's sugar. This is powdered sugar. Now you're going to soften your gelatin. Remember, we talked about gelatin. You're going to take 2 tablespoons of unflavored gelatin. That amounts to about 2 envelopes of gelatin. Gelatin will come in this little package and usually have about 4 envelopes in it. Measure it out, get 2 full tablespoons, and you're going to put it into a small bowl along with half a cup of cold water. Make sure it's cold. And you're going to sprinkle the powdered gelatin over the water and stir it briefly and allow it to bloom. Allow that gelatin to soften, all right? Or else it will be crunchy, and we don't want crunchy marshmallows. And then it will solidify. You'll get your jellyfish. I call it a jellyfish, sort of solid mass. Next, in a heavy medium saucepan, you're going to combine 1 cup of granulated sugar. You're going to combine 1 cup of light corn syrup and 1/3 cup of water, 1/3 cup of water to 1 cup of granulated sugar and 1 cup of light corn syrup. Notice I said granulated sugar here. You're only dusting the bottom of that 9 by 13 inch pan with powdered sugar, which is what most marshmallows are coated with. But when you cook the actual marshmallow, you want to use granulated sugar. You're going to bring the 2 sugars and water to a boil, and you're going to stir until the sugar is dissolved. Again, you can listen to a caramel podcast on a previous show to see how that works. You're going to wash down any sugar crystals with a pastry brush dipped in water, and then you're going to cook this mixture. Again, either if you have a candy thermometer or you want to do that softball stage, you want it to climb to 240 degrees Fahrenheit. And you'll see volcanic bubbles. The bubbles will get really like bubbles upon bubbles upon bubbles. And you want to make sure you don't ever leave this unattended. It is a sugar syrup, and you want to make sure that everything is safe. So while the sugar syrup is getting to its appropriate temperature, you're going to place 1 egg white, just 1 egg white. And you want that egg white at room temperature if possible. So 1 egg white into the bowl of an electric mixer. And then using the whip attachment, beat your egg white until it forms stiff peaks. And that means when you stop your machine and you take your whip attachment off and turn it right side up, or upside down, I should say, the peaks are straight. They sort of stand up straight like a mountaintop. Once the sugar syrup reaches 240 degrees, you want to gently place the softened gelatin. Remember your jellyfish that you softened earlier? You want to put that right into that hot sugar syrup and whisk it until it's melted. Now you remove the mixture from the heat and pour it. I like to pour it first into a greased, heat-proof liquid measuring cup because it makes it a little bit easier to add to the electric mixer. If you're brave, you can just add your sugar syrup and gelatin directly into your egg white. But sometimes I like to have that liquid measuring cup, and I grease it so that nothing sticks to it. So all your sugar syrup slides out into your egg white. So with the mixer on medium speed, slowly add this hot sugar syrup and gelatin mixture into the beaten egg. Do not pour the syrup directly onto the beaters because it will whip pieces of sugar against the sides of the bowl. So don't do that. And you don't want lumps in your marshmallow. Now, once your sugar syrup has been added, turn the mixer up to high speed. And then I like to add a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, only pure vanilla extract. Don't use imitation. And continue beating until the mixture looks light and fluffy. And it'll look like marshmallow fluff. And then using a rubber spatula, stop your machine, pour the marshmallow quickly into the 9 by 13 inch pan, spreading it evenly, and let it go. Leave it alone. Walk away. You want to allow that marshmallow to sit at room temperature for several hours or even overnight until firm. It does not need to be refrigerated. That egg white was fully cooked. Do not refrigerate it because refrigeration will cause other issues with the marshmallow and it will become hygroscopic and absorb moisture from your refrigerator and get soggy and soft. So once you remove all that marshmallow from the pan and let it sit for several hours, you're going to see you have like a 9 by 13 inch pan full of marshmallow. And what you will do is gently sort of cut around it with a small sharp knife. And sometimes I spray the knife with a little tip. Spray the knife with nonstick cooking spray and cut between the pan and the marshmallow and get that giant marshmallow rectangle out of the pan, put it onto a cutting board and sprinkle that cutting board with a little confectioner's sugar, powdered sugar, and then cut your marshmallow into any shape you want. Use a cookie cutter, use scissors and cut little squares, or a sharp knife that you have, a really sharp chef's knife that you've sprayed with nonstick cooking spray, and then cut into rectangles, squares, anything you want. And then roll each marshmallow into confectioner's sugar and store those marshmallows onto a sheet pan lined with wax paper, sprinkled with more confectioner's sugar. And then eventually you can store them in an airtight container separated by layers of wax paper, and you can store them from up to 1 week. And I don't know about you, but I like marshmallows when they're stale. So I even let them go longer than a week. And they actually stay beautifully firm. And then you can use them for s'mores, into your hot chocolate. And what better way to say to friends and family, I have some homemade marshmallows I just made. You want some in your hot chocolate? That's sort of cool. So that is one of my best marshmallow recipes. And that one I won. I bruleed it and served it with as a trio of desserts when I did this beautiful culinary competition that I won a gold medal for the dessert. And I served it with pumpkin ice cream, which is also in my new book, Baking with Success. And I served it with a little chocolate cake. So it was a real hit. So the next thing I want to discuss is a couple of tips to getting the fluffiest marshmallows ever. And these are tips that you should really follow because I have done everything wrong. I've done everything right. And I've learned from the mistakes I've made. And I want to sort of, bring it to you. You may not understand why you're doing certain things. I'm going to tell you why, because each step that you do really matters and brings you to a successful outcome. First, use an electric mixer and a whip attachment. Don't use a hand mixer. If you have an electric mixer, it's really worth investing in it. And again, that whip attachment is really priceless. You really need one. The bowl must be clean and dry. Again, from my previous show on eggs and egg foams, if there's any fat or grease with whites in the bowl. They will not beat up to their full volume. Trust me, it won't happen. Spray a heat-proof glass liquid measuring cup, the type that you use for pourable ingredients, with nonstick cooking spray, and use this to pour your sugar syrup into the mixture like I suggested before. This really will help guide where your sugar syrup is because you'll have a spout on that liquid measuring cup. And when adding your syrup, like I also stated during the recipe, don't pour the syrup directly onto the beater or you'll get clumps of sugar. It's worth repeating because it can happen. And another thing that I have done probably a gazillion times, don't overbeat your marshmallow, your mixture as you're beating everything and letting it get to firm peaks. It will set up. Once you've added your gelatin and your sugar syrup, don't let it overmix, because once you do that, it will start setting as you're scooping it out of the bowl into your 9 by 13 inch pan. It will actually set up into a blob and you won't be able to smooth it out. So don't overmix it. It really, really works if you just beat it just to when it gets nice and thick. All right. So you have all my secrets and all my tips on the best marshmallow making. So get to it. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to leave a review, I would greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions, head on over to bakingradio.com and leave me a message. I would love to answer some of your questions on air. And on the next show, we're going to be discussing chocolate mousse.